As a young entrepreneur, how difficult do you think it is to raise funding?
First round is really hard. It can sometimes be really overwhelming to be an entrepreneur. I've also put in a lot of long and erratic hours.
A lot of analyst graduates have left law firm jobs and joined you.
We've not had to utilize any of the funds that we have raised. Be at it, but take it easy, have fun. Something awesome will happen.
Being an entrepreneur and building your own startup can be very fascinating for a lot of people. But ये करना कैसे है and where exactly to begin? This is something that is tricky. To answer these questions, we have a very successful startup founder in today's podcast who went from receiving his law degree from the best legal institute in India, National Law School, building his own legal tech startup without any tech background, raising funding for his company, to being a Forbes 30 under 30 special mention. This episode will be very useful for all those ambitious people who are looking to build their own startup. And if you receive any value out of it, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that we can bring more such informative podcasts and content for you all. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi Shivam, thank you for joining us today.
Hi Varun, glad to be here.
How are you doing?
Very well.
How's the entrepreneur life going for you? Are you always hustling or do you take out time for yourself as well?
I think it's always I think it's mostly in extremes. Either when you're working and in it, you don't care about anything else. But then once you're out of it, you sometimes also forget about work. So, but I guess it's never a balance of it. I think it's usually on one of the extreme ends. And yeah, but otherwise, everything good and well.
That's wonderful. We have heard a lot about your startup Leegality. Can you tell us more about it?
Leegality is a document infrastructure platform aimed at Indian businesses. The idea of Leegality came from the fact that basically we realized that for any kind of business across any industry, any scale, there's a lot of relationships they enter into, right? Be it relationships with their customers, vendors, employees, investors, or for a lot of other financial and compliance matters, right? And everything is based on some kind of documentation, some kind of paperwork. And despite how omnipresent such documentation is, the process around all this documentation has been very physical, right? Very dependent on paper and very unoptimal. So the idea of Leegality is that we help Indian businesses carry out their documentation processes fully digitally, yet in a fully compliant manner. That's what we're trying to do at Leegality. It's a horizontal SaaS platform focused on Indian businesses.
Would you consider Leegality a legal startup or a tech startup?
That's a good question. So I think it's obviously both, right? The core product that we offer and the core value proposition, we have been only able to build that because of a legal understanding, because of a legal research, and kind of being able to give a legal solution to the problem, right? Like, because even when I described Leegality, I said, okay, digital yet compliant. So understanding of laws, the expectation of laws and the compliance of it has been a key part of the value proposition. But yet it's all packaged through technology and is a technology solution. So that way I would say it's both has a legal nature and a tech nature both at its core.
You started Leegality right after law school. So what was the inspiration behind it? What was the thought process behind Leegality?
So actually, before I started Leegality in college itself, I had started to work part-time with a few startups. One of the startups I was working closely with was a startup called Booker, which was run by a senior of mine. And it was a natural fast food startup. This was, I think, 2013-14. And so it was the time when the food tech boom was just there. I don't think food delivery, the way we see it today, had even started at that point. So I was very closely involved with Booker, and that's when I saw a lot of startup spirit, technology disrupting legacy industries, in a amazing way. So that was one, and luckily I got exposed to a lot of startup world around, and so that's when I started to feel or started to think that okay, if I can probably utilize my exposure, early exposure to startups and technology, and my exposure to the legal field to do something meaningful. And by that time, I was convinced after looking at the legal industry around and generally legal processes around that there's a lot to be done. When I used to look at in the West, for example, in the US or something, used to see that a lot of technology solutions around paperwork, documentation in the legal industry had been there. So I think by the time I graduated, it became a natural, it just came up organically that, okay, I should do something in the legal space. And that's when just started to research, think about it, and slowly it became clear that like legality was the need of the hour for the documentation practices in India.
You are from a legal background. So how would you define, how did you come up with the tech behind legality since it also involves technology?
So I think I was obviously fortunate to find a technical co-founder early on. I did try to do some hacks and do a lot of things myself, but looking back, they were just too immature, and I know none of them could have ever worked. So I got lucky that very early on in the journey, within 6 months of me having started working on legality fully, my co-founder Prakhar joined me. I think that's where things actually took a positive turn, and we could blend in the product ideas, product and solutioning ideas that we had in terms of what we want to build and actually being able to execute it.
And you have also received numerous rounds of funding. So
Yeah.
how has that turned out for you?
So I think again we've been fortunate enough that we've not had to utilize any of the funds that we have raised. Uh, so we've been for the last 4 or 5 years we've been a cash flow positive company. What that means is when we come out of a financial year, we have more cash than the cash that we had at the beginning of the year through our operations itself. So initially, obviously, when we were our first round of funding, we needed to basically get confidence and to build a payroll and have confidence in the business to keep on investing. But I think after that, the rounds we raised were more from a security standpoint. And as I said, fortunately, we've not had to use the money, and we managed to build a cash flow positive business.
As a young entrepreneur, how difficult do you think it is to raise funding? This is for people who have similar ambitions.
So I think the first round is really hard. I do remember the first round being very, very hard and it taking a lot of time and you having to prove a lot of things and convince a lot of people about a lot of things. But I think if once you manage to do that, once your first round is done, if you continue to do good work and your results are showing, then it keeps on getting progressively easier and easier. But yes, definitely the first round is, I would say, the hardest.
I see a lot of analyst graduates have left law firm jobs and joined you. What's the secret behind that?
No, I think it's just the excitement of the startup and the technology space which excites people. And the fact that what we do, the solutions that we offer through a product, they have the potential to create meaningful change and impact in our regular lives, both as individuals and as businesses or as professionals. So I think it just probably the power of our product and the solution that we offer, along with just sheer excitement that the startup and the technology industry brings with it.
Was being an entrepreneur always on your checklist? And was law a part of this?
Slightly hard to answer that question. I can't really say if it was always on my checklist being an entrepreneur, but I think it definitely always excited me to see successful business folks around being able to bring about a lot of impact and being able to exercise a lot of control over their own lives having the potential to make a good amount of money. All these things, all these values and characteristics of entrepreneurs always definitely excited me. But at the same time, I may not be able to say if it was always on my checklist. But yeah, and I think law was just accidental, to be honest. I actually can't place a finger on how on the reason why I ended up being in law. I think it was just I was just going with the flow, and it landed me up as a law student. But I'm very glad that that happened.
It turned out wonderful for you.
Yeah.
I see an inclination in NLUs, especially NLS, for law firm jobs.
Mhm.
How did you decide not to go for a law firm job or in the litigation field
Mhm.
and build your own startup?
So again, a hard question. I think not all of it was conscious. Some of it was accidental. For some part of it, I was just going with the flow, and some part of it, I didn't even get the opportunities that I wanted or I could have. So I would say it was a mix of all these three things. I was not particularly too keen to get a job in a law firm or litigate. Not to say that I didn't try. I did try to apply for law firm jobs initially, but I think very early on, very quickly, I lost my motivation and I just gave up on the idea.
What has been the most difficult part of your entrepreneurial journey, if you can share that with us?
So I think the most difficult part is that it really overtakes you, as in it can sometimes be really, really overwhelming to be an entrepreneur and to be running a large business, because ultimately for all complex, complicated problems, the buck stops at you. So it does sometimes place a lot of pressure, but I think that's still easy to get used to. The more challenging part is actually being able to switch off sometimes, and being able to sidestep that feeling of being overwhelmed and actually being able to just switch off.
When you chose to
Mhm.
go for a different path, what was the reaction of your peers when you were not choosing a traditional law firm job or litigation?
I think people were generally supportive. I don't think that anyone around me or any of my peers, any of there was any such like negative reaction or something that made me doubt what I'm doing. I think people were generally supportive. And I think thankfully at that time, by when I started startups and just technology business as had also become quite common and quite visible. So it was also not seen as something too like obscure or something. I think it had become fairly common by that point. So nothing of that sort.
So you were recently a part of Forbes 30 under 30 special mentions list as well. How was that feeling? How was that feeling to be a part of that list?
Definitely, it's always pumping, and all these validations, no matter how much you say they don't matter. Obviously, they give you encouragement and validations, and they make you feel good. At the same time, they actually don't matter, because what matters is when you are in business and you're in the market. What truly matters is the jury of the customer, and as long as the customer is happy, I think everything's going well. And if that's not the case, then none of these awards list or anything matter.
The legal field, especially law firms, is infamous for long working hours. So, how has been the work life balance for you as an entrepreneur?
Personally, for me, I've also put in a lot of long and erratic hours. But I would say one difference between what we typically characterize law firm working hours with, what is different from that in my case would be that a lot of that was by choice and not because of force. When, as an entrepreneur, you're working hard, it's because you really like it and you want to do it. And even when you have the option to not do it, you still want to do it. Right. So I think for me, I've not never really had an issue with long working hours for myself. And as an organization, I think we have a very healthy work life balance for most people. And obviously there are people who choose to do what I do, for example, where it's not that they are forced to work long hours, where they just like doing it and they enjoying doing it. But as such, I think we have a healthy work life balance in the organization.
What's the future of Leegality? Do you have any big plans you would like to share with us?
I think the big plan is not a plan as such. We have a vision that most of the documentation that is done in India today, whatever paper-based documentation is done, we can move that digital and hyper optimize the process, make it very convenient for all the stakeholders involved, make it convenient for end users or citizens, make it very easy and fast for businesses where they can focus on their core work and not have to waste a lot of time and effort on processes around documentation, just make the documentation processes more secure, more compliant, and just so that as a net effect, it's just a huge positive impact for the economy. So I think over the last 6 7 years, we've come a long way from a point where people used to question us that, okay, what we do, is that even legal, to today where like most large enterprises use digital documentation solutions in some format or another. So I think we've come a long way, but there's a long way to go because even now, it's not that physical paperwork is extinct. If you go to a bank branch, you still see a lot of physical documentation. As individuals, we still carry out physical documentation very regularly. Even like most businesses, as I said, even the ones who have started on their digitization path are still have a long way to go in terms of the full digitization. So the target right now is to basically keep on executing, keep our heads down, and just try to achieve that dream as soon as possible.
I'm sure a lot of law students, current law students, have similar ambitions as you to build a startup. What's your piece of advice for them?
So I think there is no one solution or one piece of advice. I think it's very contextual and it's indeed a very hard question. But I guess just trust yourself, do what you like, and keep on. If you are committed at anything that you like and you're at it for a decent amount of time with a huge amount of persistence and consistency, then I think ultimately, no matter what it is, you can achieve whatever you want. For law students, if you're a student, then you have a lot of time in your life to figure things out. So don't stress. Be at it, but take it easy, have fun. Something awesome will happen.
That's quite a useful piece of advice, I think. So, how are your 5 years at NLS? If you can share some stories, anecdotes about those 5 years.
No, I think I had the most wonderful time at NLS. When I went in college, I was a little, it took me some time to get adjusted to things in a hostel life far away from my hometown. And, but I think as I progressed through the years, it kept on getting better and better. And by the end of it, I think when I look back, it was probably one of the best years of my life, and it shaped me who I became as a person. And I'm really glad for that entire setup of the organization, the systems, all the peers, the seniors, the just the entire environment as to how it shaped me. I'm eternally grateful for that, and overall, I had an amazing time.
You were also the convener of Law and Technology Society.
Yeah.
So, can we say this seed of having a legal tech startup was somewhere back during that time as well?
Yeah, in a way, definitely in a way. I think it was a mix of my work with some of the startups that I was talking about, and also this bit of exposure into the interface between the overlap between law and technology, which we used to read and work a lot upon at that time as well. So, in a way, yes.
Thank you so much, Shivam. I think the insights that you shared, these were very motivational, and the determination you have shown for your startup, I think it will inspire a lot of young law students and young ambitious students who want to build their startup. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Aram. Thanks for having me here. Glad.